Welcome to a Friday edition of Full Press Coverage Radio Live. I am Ian Glendon, and of course, I'm always joined by Mr. Rhode Island himself, Mr. Mike Debate. Mike, I know you're feeling better today, so how are you doing on Friday?
La la la.
Ah,
Well,
there it
yes,
is.
much better today. Yeah, that's the way to kick off a
I
show,
felt that
especially
through
on a
my
Friday the
headset.
13th show. We need all the good karma and all the positive luck that we can get. So I didn't want to jinx it by starting it off on the wrong foot. Give you a good la 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 to open the show, and always a lot to talk about, my friend. We
Oh,
got an action-packed show.
we do indeed, and my background just went falling on me. My sheet that covers the background behind me just fell down. So, um,
See, that was the reverberation from the baritone from the la la la
yeah,
that did that. That's
exactly.
that did.
I told
Shook
you
the
I
very
felt.
foundation.
We're off to a fantastic start today. So, folks, you're gonna have to deal with a little bit of awkward lighting coming from my ceiling, but fortunately, the whole thing didn't fall down, so it's not embarrassing me whatsoever. So, um, you said it already. It's Friday the 13th, so we're hoping for some good karma, and it's Friday, which means it's generally a football Friday, which means we talk about a lot of football related things. But before we do, got a couple of headlines because we do have a good big Thursday night game we can talk about, and then of course there's a lot of stuff on the docket this weekend. But in some unfortunate news, ex NBA Commissioner David Stern suffered a brain hemorrhage yesterday. He was reportedly rushed to a hospital from the restaurant that he was at, went through surgery, and obviously we're hoping for the best. He served as the NBA Commissioner, obviously from 1984 to 2014, and the growth under his leadership. And again, you know obviously every commissioner has their warts and issues, and certainly he's not without them. But you look at the growth of the NBA under his leadership. The average NBA salary in 1984 when he took over, 250,000. Right now, it's $5 million. So on top of that, obviously the international growth, China, the addition of several franchises under his leadership, and the relocation of several others. So obviously he stayed involved in the game for quite some time, and it's unfortunate to hear because he's obviously a big part of what basketball is today, and obviously we hope he gets better.
Yeah, I mean, that's first and foremost. Anytime, and I know on behalf of myself, you, all the family here at Full Press Coverage, we definitely wish the best to the Stern family, to David particularly. Hope that he does make a full recovery on this. It's a scary, scary situation. But from a logistical standpoint, the indelible mark that he left on the NBA is really, it's second to none. You hit on that about the increase, the dramatic increase in the minimum salary for, or the average salary for the NBA player, the global force that he made the NBA. You talk about the league opening 13 offices worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
Under his leadership, they staged the first regular season games outside the U.S. That's the first in professional sports. That was not going on before David Stern did that and took the NBA global, allowed the players to compete in the Olympics. And to me, without David Stern, there would not have been a dream team in 1992, which to me is still the greatest pure collection of talent I've ever seen in the history of professional sports.
Except for the show, of
That
course.
team, well, except for the show,
Yeah.
except for when you and I take the microphone. That is the ultimate dream of everybody in the world, to hear us on the microphone, and it should be. But no, all kidding aside, the dream team in 1992 still one of the greatest collections, and that's a lot of that is owed to the vision of David Stern. So again, you put that aside, his well-being, and hopefully he'll be okay. And we await word on how he made it through surgery and how everything is working. But it sounds like the New York EMTs and first responders that helped him and transported him to the hospital and got him there acted as quickly and as logistically sound as they possibly could have. So good work by them all the time. The work that EMTs, firefighters, police officers, anyone charged with public safety do on a day in, day out basis is so seldom lauded. The only time you usually hear about these things is when there's problems or issues in the news. Definitely want to give some credit to the work that all of our first responders do each and every day. It's remarkable, and we're a safer nation because of them.
No, absolutely. And again, it's First and foremost, you want him to recover and get well because, again, although he's not the commissioner anymore, he's still involved greatly in the game, and we want him to recover. So, in to keep it kind of on a continued unfortunate note to start the show, we're trying to get these out of the way early so we can move on and hopefully uh, a goalie for the Niagara Ice Dogs, a team in the
Yes.
Ontario Hockey League, suffered a very gruesome cut, and it was a cut to the leg. Originally, I thought it was an issue being cut by the neck, but he got a skate to the leg. And if you haven't seen any of the pictures or images, I will warn you, they are very graphic. So if blood is not your thing, I'd recommend just taking our word for it. But he has successfully gone through surgery, and he is in a recovery state right now. But it's a scary thing because I played the position, and where he got cut, the inner part of his thigh. Obviously, there's a lot of you got some major arteries in that area. So we're,
Yeah.
we're not just talking about a deep cut. We're talking about a very life threatening situation. And when it comes to goaltending equipment and hockey equipment in general, you know the the pants that you wear, the shorts, if you want to call them that, they have protection on the thighs, plastic and styrofoam and all that, junk that goes into it. But the inner thigh part is just a very thin layer of the material that they use to make the pants. It's like a I'm blanking on the material. It's a very thick. It's hard. It's sturdy. Don't get me wrong, but a very sharp ice skate with a lot of force sliding into someone can um, obviously cause a lot of issues, and in this case, it did. Unfortunately, he was able to have his life saved. Again, hats off to the people who responded at the time because they quickly acted. I took most of the goalie equipment off on the ice and stretchered him off, and again, the scene was very graphic. The images were graphic out there. So if you happen to see it, you know what I'm talking about. If that's kind of thing that makes you squirmish, I wouldn't recommend looking at it. But now, hopefully, again, we hope he gets through and recovers well, and he's back out there at some point soon. But the goalie, Tucker Tynan for Niagara.
Yeah, and the key point there is that he has gone through surgery,
Mhm.
is in recovery right now. Obviously, even being in recovery, even going through surgery successfully, there are still complications that can arise. So definitely keeping him in our thoughts and our well wishes here at Full Press Coverage. It is a very scary situation. I mean, you
Mhm.
see certain circumstances like that, and we've seen so many incidents in professional sports. Baseball, hockey tend to be the types where these sports can be, where issues like this can be life threatening in the blink of an eye, whether you
Mhm.
take a bat
It's a
or
great
a
point.
ball or anything like that, or hockey, because of the speed with which the implements are moving. Um, it's so difficult to put into words how quickly these things can happen. If you've ever played a sport, at it doesn't matter what level, at a young age or at a high
Yeah,
school or
these are
college
freak
or
things.
professional level, these are freak things that can happen. And you made a very good point about playing the position. When I heard about this, that was the first thing that I thought of last night was you, my friend, because I said, he's played this position. He probably knows exactly how this could have happened.
Hmm.
And it probably hit him and affected him a little bit more than maybe just the casual hockey fan. And I'll be the first to admit, I love the game of hockey. I love
Hmm.
watching it. I love, being around it and going to games. I am a Boston Bruins fan. I don't think there's any question as to where
Hmm.
my fandom lies. But I'd be lying if I said I was an expert on the game. I've learned a lot more, having even covered it very briefly from stints with Full Press Coverage and doing a couple of articles for the NHL
Hmm.
site that we have. But I'm not intricately involved in that. Anyone that's played the game probably understands exactly how something like this could have happened. And you have to wonder: does this mean that there's a push to change some of the equipment, or protect the goaltenders better? I think there's probably a lot of protection around them. I don't know if something like this would force their hand. This may be just one of those types of freak accidents where you can't account for anything and everything happening. But it's yeah, I've seen the video. I will reiterate Ian's point. If you are anyway squeamish, or if you are in any way faint of heart, and I don't say that negatively or with any type of derisiveness, don't watch this video.
Mm,
It is very graphic. It is very disheartening. It's very uncomfortable to watch, and it's difficult to do that. And just keep in mind that if you have any type of problems with viewing images of this type, that definitely isn't for you. But I am to hear that he's going to be that he at least went through surgery okay, and that he's got a chance to recover here, because for a while they weren't. I understand that the play-by-play commentators last night were urging people in the area to donate blood
yeah,
at this point, because he was en route. That's how serious this
yeah.
was, folks.
Yeah, and again, don't if you don't want to see the photos, I recommend not watching them. But kind of to your point, I would chalk this up as this is just a freak accident. There's really nothing that you can do short of taking the blades off of hockey skates, to prevent something
Yeah.
like this. And again, it doesn't happen often, but the reality's there. Like when I was younger, I took see when you're playing youth hockey and younger hockey, if you're a goaltender, again, this is I originally thought I didn't see the play live, so I thought the play was to the upper neck area. And when you're a kid and when you're playing youth hockey and lower levels of hockey, as a goalie, you generally have an extra plastic neck guard that hangs from the bottom of your helmet, and it's supposed to obviously prevent anything like that. In the NHL, I can't think of one goaltender that uses it unless they have one of the uh, old fashioned helmets, which I don't think in. I think Tim Thomas, and we'll get to him in just actually a moment. So it kind of all comes together, but not too many goaltenders wear that. So like even when I was a kid, I got cut right above the collarbone area. Nothing like a scratch really. There's no blood or anything like that. But that's very slim difference between if the skate goes up a little bit further and a little bit hard. You know what I mean? So it's just an unfortunate risk, and I like the parallels that you brought up to baseball, because with baseball, it's in a blink of an eye you could take a baseball off the head, and you're talking about similar urgent life threatening issues. So um, and again, this was not intentional, but it kind of helps me segue into a little bit more positive news, and this is something obviously a lot of Boston fans and Boston Bruins fans in particular were very happy to see it, and it was Tim Thomas. They played the Washington Capitals the other day, and Tim Thomas was being inducted into the American Hockey Hall of Fame, and very deservedly so, in Washington that day. So it made perfect sense for Tim Thomas to come out of the bushes and out of hiding for his first appearance in what seems like many years. But the thing was, we learned a lot about why he was away from the game and away from the public eye, because we all know him as the Stanley Cup winning goaltender for the Bruins, helped bring them their first Stanley Cup since 1972. He's revered in Boston, and he just kind of disappeared after his brief stint with the Florida Panthers. Well, uh, concussions obviously suffered throughout his career, but most notably, one of the last ones he suffered with the Florida Panthers really affected him greatly. His health, his mentality, his love and desire to be around the game was greatly affected. And he said, basically, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, I just needed to go out and sit in the woods for a while and figure it out. And it looks like he looks healthy. Of course, I'm not assuming anything, because again, everything we know about uh, head injuries and mental health issues and everything like that. There's you can't assume anything. You have to always kind of be on alert for some of the signs. And of course, when you suffer injuries like this in a violent sport, those can add up and obviously have great effect on your life moving forward. But it was great to see Tim Thomas. I know that brought a smile to my face, and it was very unexpected. I did not expect to see it, and I didn't even realize at first it was him, because I had turned the game on fairly, right at the last minute, right before they were about to drop the ceremonial puck. Then I'm like, wait a minute, who's that guy on the left? That's Tim Thomas. Oh my God, So great to see Tim. Great to see Timmy Thomas.
It was. I mean, for all intents and purposes, and I know Tim Thomas has tend to be a polarizing figure at times here simply because of some of the
What
political stances that
isn't
he's
it
taken in
ironic that he
Boston.
emerged in Washington? I mean, I
I
just want
know
to throw it out there,
it
but
really
like,
truly is. I mean, considering that politics ended up being a bigger part of what Tim Thomas was talked about after he walked away from the game of hockey,
mhm,
then really what he should be remembered for and what he should be celebrated for, and that's the amazing season that he had in 2011 when the Bruins did win their Stanley Cup. But you start to read some of the details, and I did read a lot of what Tim Thomas had to say, and the devastation that concussion, which apparently he suffered in 2013 when he was with the Florida Panthers.
yep,
And he details, and I do encourage you to go out, read some of the articles out there. ESPN's Emily Kaplan has a great article, I thought, and was one of the sources that I relied on because I figured we were going to be talking about
mhm,
this a little bit today, and with due cause. She really does go into great detail with regard to Thomas's words, and she doesn't add a whole lot in there in terms of what he was feeling, what he was doing. She lets his words speak for themselves, and I admire
mhm,
that. And he really details about getting up the following morning and not being able to decide what he wanted for breakfast, not being able to decide what he needed to do. He was unable to plan a schedule.
mhm,
And this is not like all the stuff that, normal human beings get, especially at this time of year. Everybody's going crazy. And what do you want for breakfast? Oh, I don't know. I'll just grab a bar. It's not
yeah,
like that. This was a physically inability, a mental inability to be able to lock down and make a decision. It was such a scary thing for Thomas. And he was able to barely follow the schedule, get through the season, and eventually he ended up, walking away from the game completely. But it was one of the big reasons why he didn't want to talk to anybody. There were periods where he didn't talk to his family and he didn't want to have any contact with anyone. And this lasted for a good long time. It really does bring to light once again, in my opinion, and sometimes in professional sports covering it, we can forget about this,
mhm,
about the dangers of something like this, of untreated concussions, especially in the sport that we cover, Ian, football, and
mhm.
we're going to talk about it a lot today. These things can be so serious, and to see a person like Tim Thomas suffer from these afflictions is definitely disheartening. We hope that he's healthy. I agree with you. He is. He does look good. He described that it felt good to be at the arena. He wasn't sure how he was going to feel going in and seeing hockey again. There was a time period where he said he hated the game because of what had happened to him. But he described seeing Zdeno Chara and David Krejci and a lot of the guys that he's played with, and he said it was a great feeling for him to be able to do that. So good to see him back. Hope we see a little bit more of him in the public eye. But ultimately, you just hope that the health issues that he's had are behind him and he can move forward now and live a good
Mhm.
part of the rest of his life.
Yeah, and that's the most important thing. And again, like I said, anytime I get to see Tim Thomas, it brings a smile to my face. And maybe he'll start hanging around the hockey rink a little bit more these days. So, like you said, it's a football Friday here. I mean, we're not the first one to use that combination of words, but we're gonna definitely kill it because every Friday we get to talk about football because there is a lot of football to be talked about. So, before we get into the Sunday slate of games, there was a Thursday night football game last night, and first off, if you listened yesterday, I completely missed the boat on what I thought this game was going to be. I thought it was going to be far more defensive, and it was clearly not that.
I was wrong.
Yes, I was very wrong because I think I predicted something along the lines of like 17-10 or something like that, and it was obviously 42-21. So um,
Yeah.
Baltimore Ravens rolled. I don't think. I mean, we were right about that. We both picked the Ravens to win. I think the Jets were overmatched. I just thought they were going to show up a little bit more defensively, and it really wasn't the case. And of course, Lamar Jackson is top of the headlines, and for very obvious reasons. He he needed just 23 yards to break Michael Vick's record for rushing yards for a quarterback, and he did that pretty early on.
Jackson takes the snap,
Yep.
fakes the handoff, runs to the right, tucks inside the 10, and he's hit hard at the 6-yard line. and he'll be stopped there, but the pickup is enough to give Lamar Jackson the single season rushing record for a quarterback in NFL history.
Wow.
Welcome to the fresh new page in the record book that reads only Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, and before that was Michael Vick, of course, and the for all of us, especially our age, perhaps the most athletically dangerous quarterback we've ever seen. When he's out on the field, Michael Vick. So and right on cue, he was there to congratulate him.
Congratulations, Lamar. You know what's coming, man. Like I said, you was the guy for the job, man. And you did it and you did it well. Keep rushing and set the bar high, man. It's going to be amazing run for you. Appreciate everything you do for the game.
Before I get into that, first off, as someone who obviously gets on radio and video a lot, it drives me crazy that the volume was peak on his television while he was recording that video. You would think for 30 seconds you could put the mute button on and record a nice video, but hey, that's just me being a stickler for annoying things not existing. But look, Lamar Jackson's having a wonderful season. Five touchdowns last night. Again, I think he's just further hammering. I mean, there's no way that he loses this MVP. I mean, he could not start the last 2 games of the season, and I think he's not going to lose this MVP award. Which, if you believe in these issues that the MVP has had getting to and winning a Super Bowl, then you're probably not too happy if you're a Ravens fan. But well deserved for Lamar Jackson. He was fantastic once again. I mean. 15 to 23, 212 yards, 5 touchdowns, QBR, almost a perfect QBR, 134.4 quarterback rating. So, and then of course, just add in a measly 86 yards rushing, and he led the league in rush, or led his team in rushing too. So the Ravens 12-2. I mean, look, they're in the driver's seat for the top overall seed. It's going to take a miracle for them to lose that. The Patriots obviously would have to win out, and the Ravens would likely have to lose out. I don't think there's any other scenario where that happens. So they did clinch a playoff spot though with a win. They clinched the AFC North, so they are the AFC North champions, and they will have a first round bye barring anything sort of spectacular. So much of the same for the Ravens. I'm assuming your impressions of this game, because I mean they're just right now they're quite a machine, just rolling along at a pretty torrid pace, to be honest.
Yeah, they truly are. I mean, you have to give them their just due, and you have to give them their credit. They're playing well on both sides of the ball. Lamar Jackson, I completely agree with you. I think he wrapped up the MVP award last night, and I can't imagine anyone else taking it from him at this point. I think Russell Wilson, there's been too much inconsistency lately for him to get back into it, and I just don't see any other player in the league that's had the season he's been having to be able to take that away from him. And he well deserves it. I mean, it's not a situation where he's winning it by default, folks. He went out there and took it. He's had a tremendous season. I caution, and I don't want to say I really caution Ravens fans, because believe it or not, I'm actually hearing this from more the national machine than I am directly from Ravens fans. But the one thing that I am cautious on is anointing Lamar Jackson is now. I saw a tweet last night from, again, verified sources that we are watching the single greatest athlete to ever compete on a professional football stage.
We did this last year.
Exactly. And, it's and believe me when I tell you, and this is in no way a disrespect to Lamar Jackson at all. I think he's having a tremendous season. He's fun to watch as a Patriots writer, and as a Patriots fan and someone that covers the team. You don't want to see him have the success that he's having, because it does mean difficulties for the Patriots. But objectively, you have to marvel at what he's doing. But when you start labeling these, I mean, not even just the greatest. This wasn't even the greatest football player of all time. This was the greatest professional athlete that's ever walked onto a stage before and performed on a professional, platform. That's dangerous, and pump the brakes when it comes to that, because not only does it
conversation occurred.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Commissioner. I appreciate it. For once, we're in agreement, Mr. Goodell. But in any case, this does a disservice to the athlete himself, because it sets a stage and it puts them on a pedestal that sometimes it's so difficult to be able to live up to. So enjoy Lamar Jackson's season for what it is right now. Praise him for what he's doing. Let's pump the brakes a little bit on trying to say the greatest of all time. I think that term GOAT is so easily thrown around. And I think a lot of that is because they're just dying to rip the title from Tom Brady,
Oh,
who
of
actually
course.
I thought had a tremendously hilarious reaction to this last night.
He
Tom
did.
Brady tweeted out very shortly after Lamar Jackson broke that record. And I'm quoting his tweet verbatim now. Me and Lamar, 40-yard dash on natural grass, but he has to wear rollerblades. Who's buying the pay-per-view? First of all, I'm buying the pay-per-view. They actually end up doing this for charity or something like that. Yes, I will shell out to see this. I think it would be hilarious, but definitely a little bit of a backhanded compliment by Brady there. But you can tell there's so much respect between these two guys. And I thought that was a funny tweet and a classy way for Brady to be able to honor a great feat for Lamar Jackson last night, which I haven't even wished congratulations to him on that because it is truly amazing what he did last night.
I got a question though. Is Ditka in the race? Because if
Well, if a certain coach from a certain Midwestern town that starts with a C, ends in an O, and has a hickag in the middle of it, if that coach is running, I'm telling you, it's not. You're going to have to give these guys like a 3-day head start because Ditka, the minute the whistle's gone, he's already at the finish line, sitting at the table, drinking a beer and eating some Polish sausage. And he's probably halfway done with the sandwich. So you know what? Ditka by a mile.
So what you're saying is Ditka is faster than the speed of sound.
Ditka is faster than the speed of sound, the speed of light, ludicrous speed, ridiculous speed, whatever kind of speed you want to put in there. I told you before, kid, don't bother me. This is what Ditka does. He simply dominates every aspect, and the Bears should bring him back to save the season.
Would you believe that Mike is a short Italian guy from Rhode Island and not a Polish guy from Chicago? I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know. So that was great. That was fantastic. I don't know. I can't even remember what my next point was. I'm sure it was a good one, but
It
you got
doesn't
me there.
matter. Bears by 75.
Bear,
That's
Bear,
all I got to say for the
right.
rest of the day. Thank you very much.
Bear,
Bears.
the Bears. I like it over the Packers by 75. That might be my pick. We'll get to that in a minute, but yeah, look. But bottom line, the Ravens are rolling right now. They're doing a lot of things right. I do, to your point, because again, we do hear this. We heard it last year with Patrick Mahomes, and not a knock on him, but look, I think we can safely say I think he's kind of come back to the pack a little bit, and this is something that we've. And you can sit here and say injuries. Well, if you're going to bring up injuries, I can sit here and say, well, he's in his second year starting, and he's already suffered 3 nagging injuries, if you want to include the hand, the ankle, and the knee. I mean, you say hand, ankle, and knee, and you're a running quarterback or athletic quarterback, that scares the living hell out of me. So I think you can look back at the just over the top, like, nonsense praise that Mahomes got. And look, a lot of it was deserved because of what he was doing last year. But to your point, the anointment at such a early stage of his career was just, it was absurd. And again, I hope we don't see that with Lamar because, I would want to know what happens when Lamar has to throw the ball 40 times because eventually he's going to have to. And the one thing I see quite a bit with him is he's very efficient throwing the ball. The play calling, the balance between pass and run, and this helps of course because his ability to run obviously opens up a lot in the passing game for him. But I want to see him throw more than 23, 24, 25 times. What happens when he needs to throw the ball 40 times and he can't rely on running and he doesn't have that ability to run? Because again, you look at their run in this most recent stretch. You think about some of the big games against the Patriots and some of these others. They jumped on these teams so quickly. They didn't know what to hit them. I mean, the Patriots were down 17-0 before you could blink an eye, and that greatly affects your game plan. It aids the Ravens' game plan because that plays right into what the Ravens do because they have a quarterback who's incredibly gifted, both throwing and running the ball. Of course, I think he's an incredible runner. I mean, he's so fast, and I mean, again, we hear these comparisons to Michael Vick. We've heard them every year since Michael Vick's been in the league, but truly, this is the first guy I can sit here and look at and be like, yeah, this guy actually reminds me of Michael Vick the way he runs, just, for a lot of reasons. And so he's incredibly gifted, but, those running lanes and those open areas aren't going to be available if you're not jumping out on teams pretty early and getting ahead, because it gives you an opportunity to play with a lot of comfort and a lot of room for error. And I'm not saying he can't do it, but let's see what happens when it gets to the point where Lamar Jackson has to throw the ball 40 times to win a game. What if they do get into a shootout where they're not jumping ahead and kind of maintaining that lead, but playing from behind? Um, so let's see. Let's see what happens. Let's see how it plays out. Let's give this kid a few, before we start calling him the best quarterback in the league or the best athlete or whatever. Let's let him play a few seasons, But for the time being, he's been the best player this year. He's been fantastic, and he absolutely deserves this MVP that I'm almost certain he's going to get. So.
Yeah, without any question, I completely agree with you in all those aspects. And again, it's the narrative. It's getting hyped up. It's, what have you done for me lately? You're only as good as your latest soundbite or video file, I should say. But it really is something that I just think people need to be a little bit concerned about, because again, if he is going to be tested, to multiple times, if teams can catch on and prevent him from being able to run. And we actually saw a couple of teams start to catch on to that a
Yep.
little bit. I think the Jets are at the end of their road a little, and I think that's why the Ravens were able to capitalize and credit them. They took advantage of a team that was in, not really, I think, the best standing last night, but we saw San Francisco do it a little bit. We saw Buffalo do it a little bit. Teams that can sort of try to contain that prolific running game that the Baltimore Ravens have. So it'll be interesting to see how this progresses out and how it plays out. If his playing at a high level translates to a Super Bowl for Baltimore, then you're only going to hear more of it. But if that doesn't end up working out, it may end up coming back down to earth a little bit. So again, congratulations to Lamar Jackson. A great season that he's having. Looks like he'll continue to have that great season. All we're saying is just pump the brakes a little bit on this greatest athlete of all time thing, because I think that's more of a disservice to him than anybody else. It creates an expectation that's way too tough to live up to.
Yeah, exactly. Because eventually he's going to disappoint. Because let's face it, you don't get the greatest athlete or the greatest quarterback or the greatest this of all time every generation. It's just people, in this environment of reaction and overreaction and everyone having a platform. It's only continue to grow some of this nonsense. But again, this is nothing to do about Lamar Jackson, because I agree with you. I think it's a disservice to him to elevate him. Like, look at what we could look at Patrick Mahomes with a very objective eye, and had he not been put up, like, people call him the best quarterback in the league now, and I don't agree with that. I think he's incredibly athletically gifted, but how do I know that he is the best decision maker, the best reader of defenses, and the best
All right.
under certain situations and situational football? I mean, at the end of the day, let's see what happens when he doesn't have all these incredible athletes, type of thing. And again, this isn't a knock on him, and it's not saying he can't do it, but this is the problem with elevating these guys far too quickly, because you give them the title before you really see every aspect of their game, and we've seen this play out quite a bit. And I don't think um, you know I don't think it's a coincidence that there's a lot of young guys. Look, this is the year of young. We're in an era of young quarterbacks. There's no doubt about it. Like, I mean, there's been more young quarterbacks having more success now in 2019 than there's ever been before. Actually, in fact, 11 quarterbacks, and this kind of speaks to the passing era too of the league. This is astonishing, because both of us have watched football for a while, especially 90s, early 2000s, and there's 11 quarterbacks that have a passer rating of 100 or higher, and that's the most in history through 14 weeks, which is absurd, because you think about 11. When mid 90s was considered a great passer rating, now getting over 100 is nothing, and that's kind of almost to the point of average. So you have a lot of those, and 5 of those players are under 31. So you're talking about a lot of young guys. 18 of the 32 starting quarterbacks are under the age of 27. So
All right.
it's pretty incredible. And here's one last little tidbit, one last stat. In 2019, by far the most games, 234, started by quarterbacks under the age of 27, which just shatters the previous record by nearly 40 games. And we're still 3 weeks left in the season. So, this has been an era of young quarterbacks. I think you're seeing the transition to more open college style offenses. Obviously, the rules predicate that. They kind of, give teams ability to do that where it's a little bit more open passing. Again, I mean, how many times did we see a 4,000-yard passer, let alone a 5,000-yard passer 10 or 15 years ago? It was hardly ever. But now 4,000, if you don't get
All right.
4,000 yards, you're a bad quarterback. That's nothing. You can do that in your sleep now. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. So, anyways, we'll move on from Thursday Night Football. It was an interesting game. The Ravens locked up a playoff spot, and it'll be interesting to see if they decide to rest Lamar Jackson at all over these next 2 weeks, or continue to roll with him as they gear up for our playoff run. So. Around the NFL, Juju Smith-Schuster apparently aggravated a knee injury at practice, so he's been dealing with it for quite some time. And the Steelers, in the middle of a playoff wild card race, have a big matchup with the Bills this weekend, so that's going to hurt
Yeah,
them.
absolutely.
This team, but again, at the end of the day, Declan Hodges 3-0, and this team just finds ways to win despite all the turmoil they went through to start the season. So that'll be worth monitoring. And of course, if you're a Juju fantasy holder, I would hold off on maybe starting him this week. So. Well, something that's not really getting talked about too much is this could potentially be Larry Fitzgerald's last home game, and there's word that Cliff Kingsbury is going to try to lobby Larry Fitzgerald to return, and between you and I, obviously we're big Larry Fitzgerald fans, and.
Oh, yeah.
And he's always, for the Patriots, he's always been kind of that guy that got away.
Great White Buffalo.
Yes, the Great White Buffalo. There was always rumblings of...
Great White Buffalo.
Yes, I know. Always rumblings of him, potentially coming to the Patriots or being, available to the Patriots to trade, because Arizona's had, obviously, some very bad teams over the years and all that. But... unfortunately, I think that ship has sailed and that won't be happening. However, I would love to see him come back and play another year with the Cardinals. I think the Cardinals, unlike last year, are heading in the right direction. I think the combination of Cliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murray are far better than Josh Rosen and Steve Wilkes. So I mean that was clearly a mistake on their part. And look, we get a matchup at the last two number 1 overall picks between the Browns and the Cardinals this weekend, so that should be fun. But I will be interested to see if Larry Fitz gives it a more consideration to come back for another year, because I think this Cardinals team could potentially be pretty good and compete for a playoff spot next year if they make some pretty good moves in the offseason and Kyler Murray continues to develop. So I know you're a big Larry Fitz fan like me, or...
Absolutely. I mean, he's a guy that, again, I think you put that perfectly, is that he is the one that got away in New England. A lot of people look at him and say he is the Great White Buffalo, but he absolutely was that type of player that you would have loved to seen in New England. Just the type of receiver that can do it all. He could play in the slot, he could play on the outside. He was just always the type of guy that could get yards after the catch, come up big in big games. You wondered what he might be able to do with a guy like Tom Brady throwing him the ball for his entire career, or a good portion of it. Would have been amazing. But obviously he stayed in Arizona, and good for him. I really think that shows a lot of integrity on his part. This is a team that he invested a lot of himself, his family, the community that he's done. Larry is one of the best guys off the field as well as on the field. So for him to be able to invest in that community was something that is admirable, and I commend him on that. It's funny that you mentioned that there possibly might be a lobby to get him back next year. Winning sometimes can do strange things to people. It can really motivate you when you think you had no motivation left. So it could be interesting to see if that happens, especially because I think Cliff Kingsbury was the right hire for them. I like the pick of Kyler Murray. He's been very good in Arizona, and that team has the buddings, like you said, of a contender, maybe even as early as next season. So if there's something to be seen there and they can convince him that the plan is to bring in some savvy veterans, mix them with some of the great young talent they have there to compete in that division, which, keep in mind, is a very difficult division to compete in.
Yeah.
We're not talking the NFC East here, folks. We're talking the Los Angeles Rams, the Seattle Seahawks, the San Francisco 49ers. That's your competition. Yikes. That's
Yeah.
tall order. But the Arizona Cardinals can hang with them. We've seen them be in games with every single one of those teams, compete, fight hard, and make it a game. So you never know. One thing can happen that shifts the balance. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I selfishly, I'd like to see him give it one more go and see if he can do it. But if he's in any way physically hampered or he's reached the end of his line, then you have to think that maybe it's a better move doing a Rob Gronkowski and walking away while you still can, while you're still healthy, and while you still have something to contribute. Because Larry is the type of guy that's going to want to continue to do great things off the field. So yeah, I think that's a great point, an interesting one, and we'll be keeping a sharp eye on it.
Yeah, definitely. Although I think, like you said, the hopes and dreams of him playing for the New England Patriots have long gone away.
Yeah, I think that's long eclipsed. Yeah,
Plus,
definitely. But
there's I already have too many receiver hills that I'm on. I can't handle anymore. It's too much work.
it's getting
But
crowded up on that hill. He's got
yeah,
a lot of
yeah,
flags up
yeah,
on that hill.
yeah. And
But you know
look,
what? We want him on that wall. We need him on that wall.
look, we're not even going to talk about the late night, overnight Twitter messages from Antonio Brown. We're going to skip right over
Oh,
that from
goodness.
today. But
I'll
no,
tell you, I do have to give some credit to my friend Alex Barth, who writes for CLNS Media, who was brilliant and showed me the meme actually a little bit before he posted it, which is hilarious. If anybody's seen it out there, it's a picture of Antonio Brown with the cycle on top that says, trying to get back in the NFL, apologizes to the Patriots, says something stupid, and it's just a complete circle, and it has like "you are here" at this point. So
and
that
I
really, I
also
think that sums up exactly what goes on there.
no, I love that, and I also want to point out that account everyone probably knows that NFL memes stole it from him, and it was pretty funny because they barely attempted to change it. It was, they
Yeah.
reworded the one of the phrases like you would if you were in school and you go to hand in some work and they're like, did you copy this right from the encyclopedia? You're like, yeah, well, no, you need to put this in your own words. So what do? You go back to the encyclopedia and you basically just shift words around so it kind of sounds legitimate but not really. That's kind of what they did, and I laughed because he called them out, and they
Yeah, he
deserve to get
did. And
called out. But
Absolutely, Alex had it first.
exactly, like we have everything first around here. If you ain't first, you're last. You know that. But
That's right.
speaking of, we already talked about the Ravens. Obviously, they won and clinched the AFC North and, of course, the playoff spot. They can clinch a first-round bye with a New England loss or a Kansas City loss or tie because they've already won. Some of the other scenarios this weekend, the Buffalo Bills, they win and they're in. They're in the playoffs. I'm sure Buffalo's incredibly excited about that. Obviously, the Patriots, they win and they're in. So win or a tie actually will get them into the playoffs, and I think that's a foregone conclusion. In the NFC, the Green Bay Packers win or clinch a playoff spot with a win and a Rams loss or tie and or a Green Bay tie and a LA Rams loss. For the 49ers, sitting at 11-2. Simple win gets them in. They can't win the division or anything like that yet, obviously, because Seattle Seahawks right on their tail with a 10-3 record, and obviously Seahawks will also make the playoffs in a win and a Los Angeles Rams loss or tie. So a lot of stuff going down. We're getting down to the nitty gritty here in the final few weeks, and I think we kind of have an idea of who is in this playoff race. I know the AFC is a little bit more secure. I think we know the teams really. It's just a matter of seeding. Although I think that's going to be a little bit clearer, especially after this week, because I anticipate the Patriots are going to win, and that essentially to me would kind of solidify the fact that them and the Ravens would be the top two seeds, and then you can fill in Houston again, who knows with that AFC South division, whether or not the Houston Texans are going to hold on to that division lead. But assuming it's Houston and Kansas City, you figure those two teams are going to fall in line somewhere in the third and fourth seed and kind of go from there. So, but in the NFC, I mean, it changes almost daily. Like last week, it was the Saints and the Seahawks as the number 1 and number 2 seed. Now it's the 49ers and Green Bay Packers. That could switch back next week, and it'll be pretty interesting. But one of the big things I'm looking forward to, and it's something that I just mentioned briefly, was the Houston Texans, because they play one of 2 games. They have 3 games left, and 2 of them are against the Tennessee Titans. A Tennessee Titans team that is surging, and we've talked about Ryan Tannehill plenty over the last couple days and the last week or so. This is going to be really interesting to watch, because I've always liked book ending the season with several division games to start, and then obviously the ones to end the season I think are more important, because again, you get scenarios like this, and it just so happens that these 2 teams waited until the final month of the season to play, and that's kind of strange, but this gives us a great mini series pretty much, because this division is certainly still up for grabs, especially if Tennessee manages to sweep the Texans. So
Yeah, Tennessee, I mean, in terms of the latter half of the season in the NFL, you have to rank the Tennessee Titans as one of the most intriguing, one of the most exciting teams out there right
I'd almost
now.
put them
Ryan
in the
Tannehill.
top 5 power rankings, to be honest with you,
Yeah, I
because
mean,
I
if
mean,
you
if
if
you're
you just
talking
take
about here and now,
uh, absolutely. If you just take the latter half of the season into the playoff run, which is really where seasons are won. I mean, we've talked about that several times before when it comes to the Patriots, and when it comes to Bill Belichick saying you really don't begin your season and know what you've got on the docket until Thanksgiving. This Tennessee Titans team has been tremendous. I mean, they really have been. Ryan Tannehill has turned that team around like you can't imagine. And credit to Mike Vrabel for not, giving up, making the right move to go to Tannehill at that point and be able to play, the type of football that they knew they were capable of playing. There's a lot of talent on both sides of the ball in Tennessee, but this brings it all together. So, yeah, they're a team that I'm watching very closely, and by no means do I think that division is secure in the hands of the Houston
mm-hmm.
Texans. I'd say it's maybe likely that they'll continue to win out and win that division, but I would not count Tennessee out of it. I think they have as good a chance as anybody to overtake them.
Well, look, I mean, they're both sitting there at 8-5. Houston has the edge at top of the division right now, but they've lost one. Tennessee's won 4 in a row. The Tennessee defense is better than Houston defense, and the offenses are, they're 1 point off each other for total points scored this season. So, and I think we can all assume that the Tennessee offense has been greatly improved over the last 8 weeks since Ryan
Right.
Tannehill's been under center. So I even think that might be a little bit skewed, not in Tennessee's favor. So I think their offense is even better than what it indicates. So to me, I almost look at this as, this is Tennessee's to lose. I mean, you got 2 games against this opponent where I don't think they're playing their best football. They had a great game against the Patriots. Don't get them wrong, but we saw them not show up the following week, and this is kind of dangerous territory for the Texans, because they've done this before. They've had great moments where they've come in and looked like world beaters, and then, they're the same old Texans. And this could be a case where they all year just assumed, we just kind of assumed that they were, especially after Andrew Luck retired, like, oh, this is Houston's division to lose easily. And it certainly started that way, especially with Mariota under center for Tennessee. But, yeah, it's going to be fun to watch, because you don't often get this scenario play out where you have 2 teams going into the final 3 weeks of the season tied with the same record, preparing to face face each other twice in those final 3 weeks. So that's going to
Right.
be fun. And look, I don't want to write off Indianapolis, but they've kind of hurt themselves the last few weeks, because they were kind of in this mix a little bit a couple weeks ago. But sitting at 6-7, I imagine it would be a long shot for them to get in. But this Tennessee surge, though, this Titan surge has really put pressure on the Steelers, who again were they're fighting for that final wild card spot.
Right.
If Buffalo loses, I mean, imagine if Pittsburgh beats Buffalo Sunday Night Football. I mean, all of a sudden you got a logjam of 9-5 teams. Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Tennessee, Houston, or it's going to be either Houston or Tennessee at 9-5. So, that those are really the teams that are in the mix for that final wild card spot. So if everything goes well this weekend, we could be seeing quite a final 2 weeks of the season, trying to fight for that those both wild card spots. Because again, for a while it looked like Buffalo was going to run away with that, and I think the pressure is squarely on Buffalo, because they have to win this weekend. Because if they don't win this weekend and then have to go to New England, I don't think they're winning that game. All of a sudden, your playoff hopes are actually, threatened, because
Yeah, exactly. Almost in doubt at
yeah,
that point. Yeah.
exactly, because you'd be sitting at what, 9-6, and I don't think 9-7 or even 10-6 might miss the playoffs, depending on if Pittsburgh wins out and say Tennessee or Houston wins out. Those are two 11-win teams right there. So
Right.
um, there's a lot of pressure, in my opinion, on Buffalo to win this game, win this weekend, and they win this weekend again. You can pen them in for a playoff spot, and I'll be very impressed. But if they lose, I think that's going to open up a lot of issues for the Bills, because again, I don't think that they're going to go into New England and win. So
Yeah, I think I mean I know Bills fans are they're hyped up for it, they're ready for it, and look, the Bills are primed to be able to win this game. Technically, this is a game they should win if you think about it, and that's no disrespect to the Steelers. This is a team that probably is a little bit more well equipped in terms of defense and in terms of the way they're playing to be able to win this game. But Pittsburgh has been playing extremely well. This is not a slam dunk for the Buffalo Bills.
nope.
They need to go in and they need to play arguably one of their best games of the year in order to beat the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are playing at a level that not a lot of people believe they could play at. But you're absolutely right. If this game drops for the Buffalo Bills, it opens up the opportunity for so many different teams to be able to make a push at that point. And, once the momentum kind of gets dragged away from you a little bit, especially at this point in the season, so tough to get it back. So big game for the Buffalo Bills on Sunday night. This is a must win for them. I agree with you.
Yeah, look, the Steelers sixth in points per game allowed, but they're number one in sacks and number one in takeaways, which tells you they get after the quarterback and they create a lot of issues. So, Josh Allen, if you're going to speak about a weak spot in this Buffalo team, you're not going to talk about the defense, because they're number two in points allowed, and of course, very high up in a lot of other categories. It's not just points, and again, no disrespect to Josh Allen, but if you were going to talk about a weak link, it's this offense. So, if they can't establish anything against Pittsburgh, to me, I think the Pittsburgh defense is the biggest game changer in this game, because if they dominate as well as Buffalo, I think it gives Pittsburgh the edge. And then again, if Buffalo loses this game, you create a lot of issues for them, for a team that looked certain to go to the playoffs just a week ago, and now you kind of think, okay, might be a little in doubt if they lose this game. So
Right.
yeah, I mean, look, that's why we love the NFL, because it's ripe with storylines. So another one I'm going to be keeping an eye on, and we're certainly going to be keeping a very close eye on. We are getting to the point now where Drew Brees and Tom Brady should be going back and forth, leading the most touchdowns of all time, because both quarterbacks are in a position to break Peyton Manning's record this weekend. Of course, New Orleans plays on Monday Night Football, so Tom Brady is going to get the first crack at that. So he's sitting right now at 536, the record obviously being 539. We're talking regular season only, because we all know that Tom Brady has the overall record already. And don't tell me about playoff touchdowns not counting. They count, okay? But for the sake of this argument, regular season only, Peyton Manning's 539 lead the NFL. Breeze is number 2 with 537. Brady number 3, 536. So it's going to be fun to see this. And I know as a Patriots fan, you want Brady to have a big game this weekend, because you want him to do it first. We know this title, especially if, obviously if Brady comes back and plays next year, is going to be handed back and forth quite a bit. I mean, there's going to be more title changes for that than there was the hardcore title back in the day for WWF. And we
Nice
all know,
analogy,
yeah,
my
you
friend.
like
I
that?
like
You like
that.
that?
Yeah.
I came
That
up with
was
that right
great.
on the spot, because I was just
Nice.
imagining all the crazy, ridiculous pins and scenarios, like people hiding out in grocery stores and department stores. Oh, what a great era of WWF wrestling. Anyways, but That is going to be a huge storyline this weekend to see who's going to grab that first, that first lead, or who's going to break that record first. Obviously, Breeze has the advantage, and if I was a betting man, I'd probably put my money on Drew Brees to do it. But don't be surprised if Brady uses this week against the Bengals to break out. So that'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, it will be, and yeah, I think it will be. If you're a Patriots fan, I'm looking for a bigger game out of Tom Brady than we've seen the last couple of weeks. I think that Bengals defense, between the rush and the pass, I think is just what the doctor ordered in terms of being able to right what's going wrong with the Patriots offense. Hopefully, keep our fingers crossed if you're a New England fan. So, yeah, but I look for that, and I think he will. But you make an interesting point. I do think there are going to be a lot of changes, seesaw matchup back and forth a lot of times between these records until these guys are ready to hang it up. So great stuff, and we always look forward to it. It'll be fun.
For Russell Wilson, this is an opportunity for him to tie a Tom Brady record, and I'm going to say, before I even say the record, there's one gigantic caveat to it, and I'll explain after I read this, but Russell Wilson has currently 85 wins in his first 8 seasons, and he could tie the record set by Tom Brady with 86 this weekend. Now, I mentioned a gigantic caveat. In this record, they count Brady's 2000 season. That's that's 16 games he didn't play. So,
Right.
if you use Tom Brady's first 8 seasons, it's like that record that they've talked about recently. Like, he's the first quarterback to have a winning record in his first 8 years. It's like, guys, I mean, I understand that's a great accomplishment, but let's. Yes, Tom Brady didn't play his first season, so of course that eliminates him from that. But I mean, Tom Brady has 18 straight years of winning records. Like, let's pump the brakes on that a little bit. But Russell Wilson can't tie that.
It's true, but why is this even relevant? I mean, wins are not a quarterback stat.
No,
The
they're
nine wins
not.
are not a
Well, no.
Oh,
I'm
that's
sorry.
right.
We're
That's
talking
right.
about
I'm,
Russell
I'm
Wilson.
sorry, Ian. I apologize. I'm not on a Green Bay radio station this morning. I apologize. I didn't mean to confuse where I was. I got a little disoriented, a little confused. Okay, that's right. Yeah, I'm in reality this morning. Big problem. I apologize for that.
Yeah, well, it's okay. It's okay. I understand. You're trying to, play to the crowd, and certainly that's the crowd that will eat that up. But no, quarterback wins are a stat, and it is a thing, and it has a pretty good it's a pretty good indicator of quarterback success, especially when you think long term. Because go ahead, look at the top 10 wins of all time, and tell me one bad quarterback. The only case you could probably make is Eli Manning, and you know what, I can't agree or disagree. So there it is. So, Mike, we've flown through this episode. We really have.
We have.
I had a lot of other things to
Absolutely.
get to, but sometimes you gotta cut some things, and unfortunately, we were forced to do that today. But if you are a fan of the show, you will be a fan of our FPC NFL Live show, and that will air this Sunday at 10 a.m. when we will jump into a lot of these topics, a little bit more detail, and preview some more of these games, as well as give you guys some of our picks. So until then, we will not be back on this show until Monday at 8 a.m. But if you're listening on Full Press Radio, stay tuned, because Snowman in the Morning is coming up here at 9 a.m. At noon, we have College Credit Hour with Memphis Spence. Great live show every Monday through Friday. So check that out. Check out all of our great podcasts. You can go to fullpresscoverage.com/radio. There's a link to our podcast. You can see all that, including a brand new Shea Bippy. I must say, I listened last night, and I was incredibly entertained.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that. Myself, Thomas Murphy, Steve Balistrieri take the microphone, and we always have fun talking football, but talking a mob movie, this was a different kind of fun, folks. So definitely check that out. We do issue some spoilers on the movie, so if you haven't seen it, might not want to check it out yet. Watch the movie first, then listen to the Bippy.
Exactly. So until then, we will say goodbye to you all for the weekend. We will be back 8 a.m. Follow us at FPC Radio Live. Follow me on Twitter at IGLEN31, and of course, follow my man, Mr. Mike Debate, at MDABATEFPC. And folks, we will see you on Monday.